All righty. Well, we're not going to need to use the phone for this because we can discuss it right here amongst us right now. Apparently, disaster has struck. AEW is down a member of the multi-person creative input committee or whatever they call their writing staff over there. Apparently, poor old Jimmy Jacobs has said, I'm burnt out. I need to get away from this. Or am I overstating this case? Or what are the facts as we know them, Brian?
Well, there are very little actual facts, I guess, that are firmly out there other than Jimmy Jacobs.
How many factual acts are there?
In AEW, I don't know. But Jimmy Jacobs has left AEW. Jimmy Jacobs, we had heard, was basically Tony Khan's right-hand man. He went everywhere with Tony.
No wonder he was burnt out.
Bryan Danielson was the one who recommended him. And Jimmy Jacobs is someone who a lot of people have looked at as maybe not one of the people that would help with creative problems, but maybe someone who his creative input may go a different way than the way other people would think about things.
Well, but who are those other people thinking about those things? Because what I heard on the interweb, so it must be true, was that, well, Jimmy Jacobs was somebody who didn't see them pushing Daniel Garcia at the level they were pushing him at. And I was like, a voice of reason, a beacon of sanity.
See, that's the problem. And there's a few things here, but specifically with the things that have come out, and we'll talk about the list. For everything that you're like, okay, I can understand that. There's another thing you're like, oh, it's him. For instance, I have a list here. This was very public. It went around. According to the image, this was taken from a Twitter space made by the Wrestle Purist crew on Twitter Spaces.
Well, if they're purists, then they must be reporting the facts.
Jimmy Jacobs was Tony Khan's right-hand man from 2023.
It took a year for fucking Tony to break him?
Was a big reason for the rankings going away. Remember they had the ranking system?
Yes, that never was really used for anything of importance or made a lick of sense and pretty much it went away.
Came and went a couple of times, right? Didn't it go away once and then it came back briefly?
It like fungus on a shower curtain.
Jimmy Jacobs had no idea who Kazuchika Okada was?
Say, okay, I'm sorry.
I don't believe that.
I don't believe it either. Let me just say that before we get to this list, let me say I'm not just talking about somebody that I've worked with Jimmy Jacobs, and he was in Ring of Honor when I was there. I've known him, haven't talked to him in some time. The last time I saw him was at the Hall of Fame. He was working for the WWE in 2017.
You remember why he was fired?
Because he took a picture with the Young Bucks.
With the Elite. When the Elite showed up at Raw outside, he took a picture with them.
But the point is, that I was going to make is to addressing that. Jimmy Jacobs has always been a fan of wrestling and into the wrestling business. And not only has he been on the indies for much of his career, but he did work in the WWE. He knows who, he doesn't know who, Freddie the Fornicator for fucking Poughkeepsie Championship Wrestling is maybe, but he knows who Okada is. I mean, I'm just saying that right there is a ridiculous statement.
Yeah, he worked for TNA too. I mean, he worked for TNA for a while. Yes, he was with
TNA. And Okada, well, I don't know if they were there at the same time, but Okada worked there also, remember?
But he was active in the modern business. You hear the name Okada. There's no way. It's impossible. I don't believe that.
And so, and also with Jimmy, he was a good worker, but he was another guy that wasn't blessed with size. I'm not either blessing or cursing his booking ability or ideas. I've never worked with him in a capacity where he was in the office or was booking or producing or whatever, except for, as I said, the Hall of Fame ceremony where they gave all the presenters producers. That's hard to say. And he came up to me and he said, well, can I go over your speech? I said, well, I don't have one. I showed him the 2 pages of my block printing shorthand bullet notes that I had. And he said, well, don't thank Vince. I said, well, I didn't plan on it because he didn't have anything to do with the Rock and Roll Express. But otherwise, I said, Jimmy, I won't do anything to get you in trouble. I won't say anything to get heat on you, but I don't know what I'm going to say till I go out there. And we had a nice conversation. That's the last time I've seen him. So he could be crazy as a rainbow trout in a car wash, or he could be the next coming of Eddie Graham. But I'm going to give my honest opinion when I say some of these things may not add up. But anyway, now go ahead.
And I'll just say, I was never a fan of his in Ring of Honor. He was one of those guys I never got. I never got like the universe around him, and there was certainly a milieu to the Jimmy Jacobs arc over the years, and I never got into it at all.
And it possibly maybe he's a little on the spooky entertainment side, but nevertheless, in this company, he may have been the voice of reason.
Well, back to this alleged list, there is a list, but the list of alleged things. Jimmy Jacobs was not familiar with AEW programming before coming in, nor did he like it, apparently. And this is 2019 to 2022 AEW.
Wait a minute, I've never had rutabagas. I hate them. How can both of those things be true? Either he wasn't familiar with it or he didn't like it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there's no other option there. But here you go, one for the negative column. Jimmy Jacobs was responsible for the Learning Tree program. He created, if not Jericho, this is the way it's worded here. He created, if not Jericho. Oh, I guess they put a period when there should be a comma. Every single Learning Tree segment was Jimmy Jacobs. And they say that he was the one, I guess the word has always been that he was the one who came up with the list for Jericho and WWE before he left with Kevin Owens.
So you're saying he's 50-50 then?
I'm saying he has a history of working with Chris Jericho on really cheesy shit, one that kind of got over with the WWE crowd of 8 years ago, and one that is brutally awful on TV right now.
I'm not poo-pooing the idea he had something to do with it, but I think a lot of I don't know if you could have talked Jericho into doing this if he wasn't wholeheartedly on board. So I think the blame should go around.
Well, Jimmy Jacobs is being blamed for Full Gear 2023.
What happened there?
The main event and how it was booked, which everyone hated.
What was it?
Hold on, let me go back to that. Full Gear 2023.
Like, what? Do these people have this committed to memory? Like they're goddamn, that we could have used them instead of the Navajo code talkers in World War II if they've got a memory like that.
Full Gear 2023, which was less than a year ago. That's crazy. November 18th, 2023. The main event was MJF defeating Jay White.
Good Lord. Well, I mean, the result is, obviously the only thing they could do, but what is everybody upset about? Just that they had that fucking stinky match in the first place?
Well, again, if he's responsible for the main event and how it was booked, which everyone hates, does that mean the weeks leading up to it where Jay White actually pinned MJF on TV, which made no sense?
Forgot about that.
I don't know. Again, we don't know exactly what this means, but here's another one for your column. Jimmy Jacobs did not want to push Daniel Garcia. Found it laughable when it came to pushing Daniel Garcia.
I mean, well, there again, can't argue with that.
And he's 5'7", so I would listen to him.
Well, and with Garcia, it's not even just about size. It's just about, he's a lump of cold clay.
Jimmy Jacobs was opposed to having Takeshita win the ladder match for the TNT title.
Who'd he beat?
Did he win that match?
I don't know.
I don't remember the match. When was the match?
I don't know. These are horrible offenses. Nobody.
Yeah.
I expect to hear Jimmy Jacobs was the one that thought it was a good idea to burn a motherfucker's house down. Jimmy Jacobs was the one that thought it was a good idea to stick a fucking hypodermic needle in somebody's face. That's grounds for get this motherfucker out of here. But so far, I haven't seen any or heard anything that rates more than a stern tongue lashing at best.
Other grounds may be turning Chris Jericho into a tree. But let me go back to this list here. According to the people that posted this, they were comparing Jimmy Jacobs leaving to Vince leaving
What?
creative wise.
What? Okay. Was it not long ago that Tony Khan said, "Oh, we got about, I think was the number bandied about 27. We got a lot of people that have input in the various things creatively." And it was a high number. They hired Alexandra Pepperday. They hired Will Wheaton. They've
Will Washington.
whatever. They've already got all of the other producers or agents or whatever that they've signed, that whether or not they have any power is suspect, because you would think that some of these people would try to throw their bodies in front of some of the things that are presented on television. But Tony's, and then the top guys and even the medium guys. So all these people, when you've got that, you've got chaos. You have a bunch of people giving ideas, but Tony Khan, famous for the quote, at least on the phone with me, "Nobody's going to write my television but me." Tony Khan is the Vince McMahon of that world. I'm sorry, I threw up a little in my mouth saying that, but he's got the final say. And if he's writing a lot of the TV, or elsewise we wouldn't be seeing hologram. But even if it's not his idea, he has to put it in. What do people think happens? Do they think, it's like a W.C. Fields or a Mae West movie where the script says next 6 pages to be supplied by fucking Jimmy Jacobs, and they just let him do whatever he wants with whoever he wants? Here's the problem with multiple people giving ideas. It doesn't create discussion. It creates arguments and goddamn confusion. I've booked by myself. I've booked with a handful of people, and I've been a part of bigger booking committees. And the more people you put in, the more opinions you put in, the more ideas you put in, and the more conflicting ideologies you put in, the more difficult it is to get anything through in an unobstructed fashion, which is why many times the most artistic motion pictures are directed by, written by, and starred in a certain fucking guy, because it's all one vision, and at least it makes sense from start to finish. Whereas by the time you open it up, when it was me and Kevin Sullivan working with Ric Flair, we were 3 different people with 3 different ideas about a lot of things in wrestling, but the same concept and a mutual fucking understanding of what the actual goddamn business is in general. But then when you added Jim Ross, well, there's another opinion. Maybe he liked different guys. He was in the office more, so he was also listening to Jim Herd and trying to please him. But then you add Jody Hamilton, and then you put Ole in there, or Terry Funk, and then Jim Barnett, and then Herd's going to be Herd. And then nothing gets done because everybody has a different way to do it. The more people, what happens when, Brian, you're a wrestler on the roster, and you're up far enough on the card that you believe you can go and tell Tony, "Hey, I think we ought to do this."
Well, there's your first problem.
Well, but I'm just saying. And then you've come up with this goddamn, because I've had guys come and pitch me these long, drawn out, they've got synopsises and things typed out, and week 1, week 2, and people who have submitted like they think that is writing to them, the wrestling writing. And they've got, like fucking hand gestures and emotions written out. And you want to do this idea that you're pitching to Tony with me. But Tony wants me to work with the other guy. But that other guy, he's pitching Tony an idea that he wants to work with you. If everybody's not working together, if they're working independently, then they've all got ideas for who they want to work with, and there's a bunch of overlap. And then, even if you get your program with so-and-so, If he's just come off a program where he was beaten like a government mule and made to look like a piece of shit, then your program may be great, but you're doing it with a piece of shit. And again, you need one guy at the top administering all of this. And if he gets a number of ideas from competent, level-headed, experienced people, that's great. But if he gets dozens of ideas, not only from writers, but from wrestlers that want to be involved with this, that, and the other guy, then you've got a fucking mess. Then if this guy's working against that guy, the other guy that wanted to work with this guy is going to want to interject himself in there, or elsewise he'll look weak, and it just becomes chaos. So to blame Jimmy Jacobs or any other individual for the gangbang of a booking scenario here, a gangbang of a booking team that Tony has assembled underneath him, is ridiculous. Yeah, that not only can one guy leaving not make a major change in that creative unless it's Tony Khan, they could fill up a fucking minivan and run it off a bridge and it wouldn't make a discernible difference.
Yeah, you see, and that could all be true with Jimmy Jacobs also being guilty of having bad ideas.
Yes.
And Jimmy Jacobs was traveling with Tony. I mean, there's one of the rumors going around, I'll get back to the end of this list, one of the rumors going around, and I don't believe it just because he was traveling with Tony. One of the rumors is the reason it happened so abruptly is he's on the no-fly list. He had some sort of incident on a plane where he yelled at someone, and now he can't
Was
fly.
he the one doing the yelling?
Maybe so. But again, I thought he was flying with Tony Khan, so that would, I don't know if the no-fly list applies to private.
No, if you own your own plane, you can transport the fucking embalmed corpse of Adolf Hitler around if you want to.
Oh no, I think that's smuggling and a whole bunch of other problems there too, but it depends on what it is, but again, that's just a rumor. But what you said before...
But if Jimmy Jacobs did have a bunch of bad ideas, it's still Tony Khan's fault for doing them.
It's exactly it. Tony Khan is the problem. And Tony Khan will put his foot down more with agents and people who want input on the creative more than he will any of the talent. And you made a mistake before because you said if you're a top talent and you're able to go in there and pitch your things to Tony, that's the problem right there. That's why I jumped in. Top talent, of course, they've always had that kind of relationship with the promoter. And in AEW, you got to figure Moxley, Danielson, MJF, maybe Ospreay, Omega when he's around. These are guys that should and do, more than likely, have direct access to Tony.
Yeah.
And can do or not do what they want. The issue is when it's not main event people. And they could just go into Tony and say, this will not make me happy. I don't want to do this. And that's where, as a booker...
I will not be amused.
As a booker and as a promoter, as the showrunner, he doesn't put his foot down. He'll put his foot down and let people know that he's running the creative. But if the talent's upset, he will change everything on the fly. So I think that's part of the issue. Jimmy Jacobs may be responsible for some bad stuff on the show, but Tony Khan is the one putting everything on the show. Tony Khan is the one who gets the blame for all the creative. But to end this list, Jim, according to this, Jimmy Jacobs was Dynamite's top writer.
Okay.
According to this, an AEW talent...
That right there is enough to get you banned from polite society, but...
According to this, an AEW talent was listening anonymously to this conversation and essentially agreed to all of it. And then a small note, the talent noted that Peppermint has never watched AEW before she came on too, but is seen as a positive force.
Oh, good Lord.
Due to her improvements for the women's division.
Oh, okay. Well, now, why didn't you just read that part first? Because if anybody thinks that not only has the women's division in AEW improved with the addition of Alexander Pepperday and her friend Mercedes Moon, Doesn't that pretty much shoot holes in their credibility a mile wide?
Does improve just mean you got more TV time?
Well, that doesn't necessarily, then that wouldn't be improved. That would
No,
just be elongated.
it's not improving at all.
Who knows? Who knows what to think about what these people think?
Can you imagine spending a year trailing Tony Khan? And that
Oh,
means it doesn't
only,
just mean
only if I was working for the DEA.
it's not just going with him everywhere, it's his hours. If Tony wants to talk creative at 3 in the morning, I would imagine you have to be woken up to talk to him at 3 in the morning to reinforce his ideas or try to find a gentle way to talk him down.
So Tony Khan was able to take a guy that's been a pro wrestler for 20 years and kept that schedule and burn him out in a year.
Hey, whatever happened to that Lacey? Wasn't she involved with Jimmy Jacobs?
Lacey Von Erich?
No, the was she a wrestler?
Oh, the valet Lacey.
Wrestler
There
and
was
valet.
a valet,
Yeah.
Valet of wrestling named Lacey. Yeah, that was
Valet of wrestling, yeah.
yes, that was the valet of wrestling. VOW. Yes, that was in Ring of Honor years ago. I don't remember any details.
What do you think about the fact that with the news of Jimmy Jacobs leaving right before the pay-per-view, that you did see so much coming out that it appears was coming from the AEW locker room in terms of complaints about him? That as soon as it happened that these started coming out, I don't know. It's weird, that kind of reaction. What do you think?
That's a thing that made me think that me and Jimmy Jacobs might get along, because if that locker room was complaining about him, he was probably saying, "Slow down, quit trying to fucking kill people. Why are you trying to push these miscellaneous indie characters?" Any of that stuff. Maybe that's what he was saying. That's why he became unpopular in the locker room. I mean, we can't tell because none of these people are really reliable or unimpeachable sources.
Jimmy Jacobs caused people to say, I miss the days where QT wrote the TV with Tony.
Yeah, again, the more I hear things like this, the more I think he was saying, "What the fuck, are you crazy? Why would you want to do that?" Yeah, but I find it hard to fault Jimmy Jacobs the more that I hear about this, but I'm still open. As more information comes out, we will keep the people apprised. And apparently things should look different from here on out. If it's like Vince leaving, they'll encounter a major renaissance. They'll start setting all-time gate records,
Hey,
or they won't.
On that topic, real quick, did you hear the audio that the Meltzer Says What Twitter account put out there? I don't have it handy. If you want it, I can get it, but I don't even have it handy. I thought maybe you'd heard it. Of Dave Meltzer the other night saying, I have it. I came up with the idea of what can help AEW. They got to start running Dynamite in smaller buildings.
Yes, I heard you.
What? You just came up with this? You came up with this?
He's like, you get on Hotchkiss Featherbottom, you say he tries to take credit for people's ideas. But Dave said, "Oh, well, they ought to run smaller buildings that seat like 2,500 and fill them up. That would be a better atmosphere." Wow, what an earth-shattering, revolutionary type of idea. If only someone had thought of it much before.
Literally every single thing, it keeps happening. Every single thing that we poked at and pointed out, and we were told that we were wrong and out of touch, you specifically, like, it takes a while, but eventually, one by one, each one of these things, Meltzer's come around, it seems like. He can't avoid it. He can't ignore it anymore.
Now he brings it out so that he can try to counterbalance it with positive stuff or explain it away or make it seem not so bad. But you can't ignore anymore that the emperor has no clothes and he's showing the world his willy.
See, that's the one thing that Dave still hasn't said, and it comes back to this Jimmy Jacobs conversation. Unless you're willing to come out and say Tony can't book and not pussyfoot around the idea that Tony can't run the company. Because you're still, like, Dave's like making excuses like, oh, he works long days and he has all these things. But then he stops short of saying he should stop doing this with AEW.
Yes.
Own it, back it, still throw all your money at it. but find someone, and I don't know who. Maybe the first person won't work, but find someone else. Even that will give you goodwill with the fans if they announce that Tony was stepping down.
Yeah, because you don't hear the warm applause and affection when Tony comes out and starts screaming wide-eyed like a maniac, like you did when he first started coming out and doing that. I think they're starting to feel a little awkward about him.
Yeah. I can't wait. You brought it up earlier. Kevin Owens, Kevin Steen. We talk about wrestlers getting access to Tony and being able to change things because they're not happy.
Oh, good Lord.
He invented that. That was he started that.
He is the poster boy, patient zero.
This could be good.
But anyway, yeah. So Tony's schedule, and that's the thing you mentioned, and then I'll throw it back to you. But Uncle Dave, he will stop short of saying, Tony, just don't do this anymore, because he knows that will create the irreparable rift rather than just, well, he's got a lot on him and he's so many demands on his time and blah, blah, blah. Ole did it best when he closed down the fucking Georgia Wrestling Superstars. It was a few simple words. Don't do this anymore. What's that, Ole? Any of it. That's what they need to tell Tony. Anyway, what are you telling the people over there on the fine Arcadian Vanguard Network this week?
We're telling them lots of things, and everyone sounds better than I do here today. I sound like shit. Go through or listen to Everything Is There, all over there, on
over there,
Facebook, facebook.com/Arcadian Vanguard, and of course, Twitter @Superpodcast, the wrestling news each and every day. Get all the news, no opinion, and no conjecture, just the news.
No paywall.
Just the news, ma'am, no paywall, ma'am. TheWrestlingNews.com directly or wherever you find your favorite podcast. Want to make mention of the latest episode?
No paywall, ma'am, or sure.
Want to make mention of the latest episode of Shut Up and Wrestle with Brian Solomon, his guest, Bull James, the former Bull Dempsey in NXT. Hear about that or hear from him, SUAWpod.com. Shut Up and Wrestle with Brian Solomon, wherever you find your favorite podcast. And here we go. The 605 Super Podcast, The Mothership! I did it. Go through the archive, 605pod.com. Be finishing some stuff soon. The Mothership.